Well, I grew up on Bull Run between St. Paul and Colburn. I went to high school at St. Paul, graduated from Clinch Valley College, which is now University of Virginia at Wise. Once I got out of college, I need some work, so I took a job with Clinchfield as an engineer. And once I got that job, I moved into a management trainee job, and from that point on, I worked in the safety department and several departments, later on becoming a mine foreman, superintendent, spending most of my career as superintendent. In '82, the coal industry was having some tough times, and Clinchfield shut down the Yelling Branch mine that I was superintendent at. And at that time, they transferred me to McClure 1. The McClure explosion took place in June of 1983. This was the evening shift. And at the beginning of the shift is basically a normal shift. The only difference other than what we'd normally done was bolting a few ribs. The coal had got higher in the in-by place. Everything else seemed to be just a normal shift. Well, once we got on the section, we had some rock dusting that we needed to do in our return entries. So I'd sent a couple of guys over to take care of the rock dusting. Most everything else was just cut and dry, cut one place after the other and bolted, except for, like I said, the rib bolting. And at the time of the explosion, I was standing in the in-by place with two of my employees. We were installing, I guess, the last of the roof bolts in the rib. The miner crew had just, they had lost their spotter, and the helper had come up and he'd asked me if he could use mine because they had just moved into a place. And I guess before he got back to the miner, then that's when I heard the big gush of air that came up the entry. And as I looked out to see what was going on, I was standing in front of a fly that was about 8 foot high. That fly raised up and went up near the roof, and there was a cream-colored dust, and it was sort of warm. And then that settled down, that fly fell back down about halfway, and then there's another gush that came back, and it was black. You couldn't see anything. At that time, I sent one of the employees over to the phone to see if they could get a hold of anyone, while the other guys, they were hollering off and wanted to know what was going on. They went to the man trip and got themselves rescuers. Later on, I went back, during this process, I went back to the power unit. I was going to turn the power off. But as I got ready to do that, I got thinking, well, maybe somebody out by me needs that power. So I didn't knock it. I went back to the dinner hole on the man trip. Now everyone was on the man trip. So we started out, and as we went down the track, it was dusty. There's debris out in the track. Some of the guys had their heads stuck out, watching for stuff in the track. We had to travel approximately 600 or 700 feet before we got to where the one left panel had cut into the bleeders. Once we got there, the air cleared up. All the dust was in by us or to the other side. So we stopped, and me and one of the guys walked over into the longwall panel face. We didn't go very far, maybe a couple of breaks, and it was dusty. It wasn't anything as far as air that bothered us, but it's dusty, and I was concerned about my people. I needed to get my people outside. So we came back, got on our man trip, and at that time I was really concerned about the intersection near the outside of the mines because I was afraid that's where the problem had occurred. We had debris on the track. we also had dust in the air that made it difficult to see. And of course, we didn't know what we were looking for, what to expect. This dust was mostly black. This is the second dust. It had begun to settle down some, wasn't moving at the same rate as before, but it was still difficult to see any distance at all. We had the same issue once we stopped and walked into the longwall face. We had the dust. We couldn't see very far. So it took us a while to travel from the section down to where the one left section cut through to the fresh air. Once we encountered the fresh air, we felt good. And like I said before, I was concerned as to what I was going to find at the mouth of the section. I was confident that things were going to get worse before they got better. Now, one of the guys did put his on, but I didn't instruct people to put them on. I just told them, I said, now guys, we're only going to last an hour, so let's think about it and try to get the most we can out of it. Once we got to the elevator bottom, everyone left going outside except for Ron. Ron was acting mine foreman that night. And I was telling him that somebody needed to go up to 1, 2 left and check on those guys. And he asked me, he said, will you go back with me? Well, I told him, yeah, I'll go back, but let's try to find a self-rescuer. At that time, the crew had taken mine outside, and he didn't have one either, so we had to hunt one up down there, or 2 up. Once we found a self-rescuer, we started back to 2 left. And on the way to 2 left, we were probably midway there, and we found Blake Blackstone on the track. And Blake had a spotter holding it up against a bradish. Well, we stopped and grabbed Blake and brought him with us because I gave my spotter to my miner crew. So I was tickled to get a spotter. And we took Blake with us, went on to 2 left. When we got in a dog turn and 2 left, we seen a man trip down there with the lights on it. So we stopped. I jumped out and I run up to that man trip. I was going to get on the man trip and ride it on to 2 left. Well, when I put my left hand on that man trip to get in it, it was hot. So I said, no, we're not going to do this. So I knocked the breaker on the man trip. And we started walking from that point, and we walked up until we got to where the number 1 entry had been dropped. At that point, you could see the dust moving from right to left. It was real dusty. You couldn't see anything. So we decided, now, we can't get in this. We can't breathe this. So we thought, well, we'll go back outside and we'll have to get my rescue team to help us. But on the way back, we realized that the track was still in number 1 left entries. So we decided we'd ride up 1 left and see if we could get back to 2 left. Now that 1 left took us back to the bleeders that I'd already walked into a little bit, and we had to walk across that face. So once we got up there, we walked across the face, and we got where I think we were probably within 2 or 3 crosscuts of 2 left. And at that time, we could hear Miles hollering for help. So then we knew we had some survivors, or at least 1 survivor. So we went on across and found Miles standing beside the pinner. We found the other operator, Boyd, laying underneath the T-bar, unconscious. And we also found another boy that was more or less in shock. He was just crawling around, moving around. All of them had their lights and their hats blown off, so they couldn't see nothing. And of course, it was still dusty. But meanwhile, before it actually got to Miles, we found Covey French laying face down. He was dead. Rigor mortis had done set in. When I turned him over, he just stopped. Everything turned at once. We went ahead and we found the other guys is on the section, basically in the same shape, except for those survivors. Then, once we got her looking around and see what we had one guy that Miles was burnt to the point that we couldn't calm him down, couldn't get him to sit down. I really didn't know that he was burnt that bad. But we would set him on a cushion, and while we were trying to look for the other guys and stuff, and Miles would get up and go to hollering again. But we decided that Blake and Ron would take Miles, and he could walk him back across the face and take him outside and get some help. And I would stay up there with the other two, because I had one unconscious and I had another one that was pretty much in shock. But I felt like if I needed to, I knew I had fresh air at the mouth of one left, where I just came from. So I felt like if I see anything, heard anything that concerned me, I could try to get those guys back down there to the fresh air, or at least one of them. When Blake Blackstone came back, he found the 5 hats. He counted the hats. He said, "Hey, we got 5 hats. We got 4 people." That started the search for the 5th guy. We felt sure that Reiner and the repairman had been on the man trip that we had found at the mouth of the section. So at that time, we realized that the 5th person was on the section. And after a search, we found the 5th one underneath some tubing beside the miner. And we had accounted for everyone except for the 2 guys that was on the man trip. Once we got the last 2 survivors to the elevator, we went outside, and their mine rescue team had already gathered. There was 2 or 3 mine rescue teams. There was a couple of guys at the bottom of the slope. But once I got to the top of the elevator, they grabbed me and took me into the superintendent's office, which was basically the headquarters at that time, and they more or less debriefed me as to what I'd seen, what I'd done, and what I thought we needed to do. And after a short conversation, and it was probably already in the process, they began to send the mine rescue team up the number, the 2 left. And it wasn't long at all until they had hollered out and said that they had found them. Now, there was no communication after the explosion from the inside to the surface. So they had to wait till someone come outside and could tell them what was going on. Well, the next month or so really was pretty tough. We spent the biggest part of the time recovering the mines. It was very difficult for the people to come in. We couldn't work them all. We just worked maybe 8 or 9 at a time. And it was really hard on them because they hadn't seen what I'd seen. I'd been there the entire time. And I could see where we'd made a difference and where things were improving. But those guys, when you put yourself in their position, they didn't know. They just know what somebody had told them, what they'd seen in the paper. And a whole lot of that didn't correspond with what had actually happened. And of course, you still had those people that lost loved ones and friends. It was tough for them. I think it was a lot tougher for them than me. Not that I'm any tougher than them, but it's just that I was right there in it. And they had to walk into a lot more unknowns than I did.